Hi, this is Chris from C Sports with a preview of the Western Conference playoff matchup between the Minnesota Wild and Vancouver Canucks. This postseason series is highlighted by a fast, young, and offensively gifted Vancouver team led by Elias Pettersson, Boeser, Horvat, and Calder Trophy finalist Quinn Hughes. Minnesota will counter with an aging roster led by a solid defensive group of Ryan Suter, Dumba, Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin. In the regular season, the Canucks posted 78 points, good for third spot in the Pacific Division. Vancouver is the 7th seeded team in the Western Conference. The Canucks are a very skilled but awfully inexperienced club. However, a qualification round victory could do wonders for that confidence going forward, not only this year, but also serve as a positive building block in the years ahead. The Wild, on the other hand, are the number 10 seed in the conference, following a 77-point season, good for 6th spot in the Central Division. After a late season roll, the Wild had about a 70% chance of making the Stanley Cup playoffs when the season was postponed. Offensively, Vancouver ranked 9th in goals scored with 224, while Minnesota scored only 6 fewer. Unlike the Wild, though, the Canucks are a young team who seem to be trending in the right direction. JT Miller and Pettersson recorded 72 and 66 points respectively for Vancouver, making them the first and second best forwards in this series. Horvat scored 22 goals and had 53 points, while defenseman Hughes also racked up 53 points as well. Boeser was one of the Canucks' top players through mid-January with 16 goals and 43 points in 45 games. He was limited to a couple of assists during a 12-game stretch from mid-January to early March and missed some time due to ribs injury. But he had plenty of time to get back to 100% and will provide the Canucks with yet another threat. Then there's 23-year-old forwards Jake Virtanen and Alan Gaudette, who aren't proven top 6 forwards, but are capable of possibly chipping in with a few key goals over the course of this series. Also, don't forget about Tyler Toffoli, who won a cup with the Kings and has played very well since being acquired by Vancouver. Minnesota was more proficient at 5-on-5 scoring than the Canucks. With 156 goals, the Wild ranked 6th in the league, while the Canucks scored 141 times, ranking 17th. The Wild were the definition of a middle-of-the-road team offensively. They lacked star power up front, with Kevin Fiala being the only player with over 50 points, and just one of 2 Wild to score at least 20 goals. That said, they do have some depth. 7 different players recorded at least 30 points for them in 2019 and 20. The team will need veterans Eric Staal, Zach Parise, and Matt Zuccarello to lead the way offensively. Keep an eye on younger players like Jordan Greenway and Ryan Donato, who may surprise in the postseason if given a chance. It would also help if Alex Stalock could be counted on to contribute offensively, but that might be asking too much. At the end of the day, the Wild lack a truly gifted offensive player with game-breaking potential. Defensively, both teams are pretty much even when it comes to goals allowed. The Canucks allowed 3.1 goals against per game for 16th in the league, while the Wild were 22nd at 3.14 goals against. Ryan Suter is one of the best minute eaters in the league. Under normal circumstances, he'd be heading into the playoffs after a long grind and be asked to play upwards of 30 minutes a night. In spite of that, having Suter to be completely fresh coming to the playoffs is a big plus for Minnesota. The Wild will be able to lean on him heavily without fatigue being as big of a concern. Combining Suter with Matt Dumba, Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin gives the Wild a solid top 4 unit that will need to be at its most effective against a young and talented Canucks team. When we look at goaltending, Jacob Markstrom had a solid season for the Canucks. He had a .918 save percentage with a 2.75 goals against average. He has exceptional quickness for such a tall keeper, plus outstanding competitive drive and big save ability. He can get a little rattled in pressure situations and lose his position in the net. Markstrom will be playing in the NHL playoffs for the first time. For the Wild, Devan Dubnyk had a disastrous season, posting a 12-15-2 record with a 3.35 goals against average and only an .890 save percentage in 30 games. When given the chance, Alex Stalock was effective down the stretch with an 11-4-1 record and .920 save percentage in 16 games from January 16th onward. But Stalock has never ever started in one playoff game, and that was back in 2014. Combine that with the lengthy pause between the season and playoffs, effectively killing any momentum he may have built, and the Wild's goaltending is a huge question mark. That's particularly problematic because it's not as if their offense can be counted on to make up for that deficiency. If we're looking at special teams, a possible matchup worth keeping an eye on is the Canucks' fourth best power play, which succeeded at 24.2% clip, going against a Minnesota penalty killing unit that ranked 25th. On the flip side, Vancouver's penalty killing unit ranked 16th at 80.5%, and the Wild was 11th at 21.3%. An X factor could be Michael Freeland, the Vancouver winger who is coming back from a concussion injury and played in only 14 games during the season. However, he is a playoff-built power forward whose intensive style is exactly what the Stanley Cup playoffs calls for. Whether Freeland even plays in the postseason is still very much in the air, but even in a limited role, he could provide some much-needed experience and grit for the Canucks. These two franchises are heading in different directions. Minnesota has been lost in the wilderness for years. They're not completely lacking in young talent, but they gambled big on the idea that Ryan Suter and Zach Parise could lead this team to a Stanley Cup glory. However, this is the 8th season of the duel's matching 13-year contracts, and Minnesota never managed to do better than a second-round appearance with the two of them. Now, Suter and Parise are each 35 years old and still eating up plenty of cap space. They're still decent despite their age, especially Suter, but the Wild's opportunity with them is closing, if not already completely shut. Minnesota has plenty of playoff experience, but not much experience with playoff success. The gap between these two teams is small, so either one of them could win without it being an upset. The question is, which team can impose its style on the other? The Wild will have to grind the game down because they will not be able to match the Canucks in a wide open style of hockey. Will the Canucks have the discipline and necessary toughness to succeed those moments when the game is not so freewheeling? Vancouver scores more, gives up less, has a better power play, and a better penalty kill. 4 green checks for the Canucks there. Minnesota is not going to be a pushover, but they've been submarined by their goalies. The key will be Vancouver's high-end offense going up against the Wild's solid top 4 defense. I'm giving the edge to the Canucks, and my prediction is Vancouver in 4. Thanks for listening. And by all means, feel free to share your comments and predictions of this series. And please subscribe to C Sports.